than your currency. Splurge your millions buying houses like.
Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the NDIS with Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch. This is the show unraveling the truth to the facade of the 21st century, and we're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. And reality that is, what a good time to be alive. Today I'm answering questions. I've got a list of questions from you guys. I've just had them sent through my screen. I haven't even looked at any of them yet. So I do appreciate your comments. I do appreciate your questions. Do send them over and my team collate them, and we do community questions every now and then. First question here is, what do you think about NDIS and what is it? I'm not a fan of it, for starters. Guess probably the best way of explaining why I'm not a fan of it and what it is the question. But NDIS housing is a scheme that came out, I think, a couple of years ago. There's a lot of people that are, disabled. They've got disabilities. They might be in a wheelchair. They might be mentally handicapped. They might be physically handicapped. There could be, broad range of people that may not be able to live in a house. They might need a carer. They might need to have, a place where they can have their own little room and a community sort of area. And the government need to provide for these people, otherwise they'd be having to accommodate for them. So what they do is they pay these grants and special levies to these organisations, which facilitate care and accommodation for people that need help, which is cool. And there became a market for it. Like, I've seen different things over the years. There was this thing called NRAS, which is the National Rental Affordability Scheme. It was a thing introduced by Kevin 07 back in 2008, 2009, something like that, where basically if you were an investor and you lowered your rent, so instead of charging $300 a week, you would charge $250 a week, the government would pay you a grant of like $6,000 a year or $10,000 a year or something like that to house it. So it was a sort of like a collaboration between private investors and Housing Commission sort of set up, so they could keep Housing Commission off the ledger and provide affordable housing. What they did is they tied it to new building and they gave those grants away. I've seen lots of these grants, but like anything, when they do introduce things like this, it's like those pink bat schemes that were also introduced, and everyone started getting these pink bats just thrown in the roof, and there was fires, people died, and all that sort of stuff. They're called a scheme for a reason, right? And anytime I hear a scheme, I just think dodgy, right? When I hear a scheme, I think dodgy. And when we look at NDIS, I don't think of it anything different to that, where you've got the government trying to do something good. They've got to look after these people. They're putting it in the private hands. They're taking it off their balance sheet. There's a market around that where there is some very, very good operators that are doing very good things, but it's also created a big market for sales brokers out there that have got glossy brochures. And I've had a few mates that have come to me and they said, "Oh, we've got the ability to sell these NDIS things," and I'm like, "Well, I don't want to hear about them." And I've asked them a couple of questions though, like, "Would you buy one yourself?" And they're like, "Yeah, I would when I first saw the numbers, because you get a high rental return. But when I look further into it, I realized that the house next door would sell for $400,000 and the NDIS house would sell for $700,000. They're selling these things over market value. So I'm all about buying things below market value. These guys are selling things over market value. The other part about it is that you've got this property which is designed with wide sort of entry areas, weird sort of layouts in the houses, weird handrails and different ramps and stuff like that. If you had to go and retrofit that and put a normal occupant in the house, if you were to sell it as a principal place of residence or a normal rental property or whatever, when it comes time to do so, you would have to, no one's going to want to buy a house with ramps all through it and stuff like that. So for me, it's a no-go for NDIS. I've seen a lot of scammers in this area, just as I've seen in NDIS, just as I've seen in dual key space. When I say dual key, it's like when people get a house and split it into two, and they say you get higher rents, and it's ugly. You've got all these other issues that are surrounding it. Just be very, very careful. I do not own any NDIS properties. I do not sell or advocate NDIS properties. I have heard a few people making money from doing this, but I think that the most people that make money are the developers and the people that are selling these schemes, the NDIS scheme, and they package it up and they sell you a product which is turnkey, And when you're selling the turnkey product, that's where all the sort of spruikers are getting their cuts and their clips and stuff. So just be very, very mindful. When you see NDIS, 95% of the time I get scared of it. I have heard of a few operators that do run the rental management side of it, and those guys seem to be decent and doing some nice things out there. And I've got a couple of mates that have got some connections that have been sort of renting through those agencies, and they get generally a bit of higher rent. But whenever I see a property being sold as an NDIS product, absolute snake oil. I've never seen one that's good. So just my feedback to you guys. Question number 2, what about yourself, your environment and life do you have to accept in order to become successful? Good question. What about your life and environment do you have to accept? Look, there's been a lot of shit thrown my way throughout my life in success. I've been through good times, been through bad times, all different things in between. But what I've realized is that, a lot of people, there's a saying, right? Winners are willing to do what losers are not. And a lot of people want to be successful out there without doing what it takes to be successful. People sit there and they want to be at the club at 3 o'clock in the morning drinking because they think that's what success looks like. People want to go on party and travel because that's what they think success looks like. But you want to build yourself a sustainable model. For me, I was willing to do whatever it takes. For me, I've seen my family work very hard and people work 2 jobs and all that sort of stuff to get by. And I thought of myself when I first started, I was like, I'm young, I'm like 17 years old, I want to build a property portfolio. I will work 2 full-time jobs if I have to until the age of 30. And I'll work from choice, right? So I did this thought to myself, if I work 2 jobs, right? And if I was 17 and if I could earn 2 full-time incomes, one, if someone could get by on 1 income, then on 2 incomes, I could save a whole income. And then on the first income, if I'm living at home and trying to cut my expenses down as much as I could save another half of that income or 3/4 of that income, and I could invest it all. And then seeing that compound with the assets that I was buying would give me a very comfortable life. A lot of my friends and whatnot around me were like, Birchy, why are you doing this? Come travel, go on a tiki cruise, whatever, was exciting at the time. But that didn't excite me because I knew where I wanted to be and I was happy to do the sacrifice because I could see the delayed gratification. A lot of people will diss you. People will say, oh, you're wasting your life or this or that next thing. But I knew that I just wouldn't have to be working. So for me, I've had to come over adversity. I remember my 21st birthday. Actually, was it my 21st? I think it was my 21st birthday. It was either my 21st or a girl I was dating when I was 21. It was her 21st, either one of it. It was a really bad situation. I had 2 tenants in my first place ever. I was doing some works there and there was a excavator had gone over a pipe. I couldn't afford a plumber, I couldn't afford stuff. And there was just a big hole of sludge, right? This big sludgy, muddy hole was getting bigger and bigger. And it was in the main area somewhere and there was no water in the house. So I was like, shit, I have to get water into my tenant's house. So it was at my birthday or my missus' birthday, whatever at the time was this girlfriend that I was seeing. It was like either one of her birthdays I'd forgotten that I had to go to and it was like late. It was hers. And it was late and it was like getting calls and texts and stuff like that saying, you got to come, you got to come, you got to come. I'm like, I've got 2 tenants here that pay me rent every week. They've put the roof over their head that I've provided for them. I've got a party to go to. Yes, I have to sacrifice or go there, or I've got to fix this. And fortunate enough, I think it was like maybe an hour in or something, I'd been able to get down to it. But I'd spent the whole day digging out, and I was like dumb at the time, and I did it all by hand and all this sort of stuff. But that's what I had to do because my tenants. I have had to do lots of things, right? Lots of sacrifice, lots of commitments over the years, missed things, missed opportunities, fights with people, whatever, because, important things need to happen and people don't understand that. So if you have a vision of where you want to go to, the world stands aside for the person who knows where they're going. If you have clarity, you know the steps that you need to take, you just keep making those steps to get yourself closer to it. Your friends will tell you shit, your family will tell you you're wasting your time. Like my mum used to say to me, don't work too hard, don't do this, don't do that, do that thing, right? And every time throughout my investing career, I really scared her because she didn't understand debt. She didn't understand certain things. And, it was scary for her back in the day. I still freak her out nowadays. Like sometimes I'm driving, I'm like, Mum, I just settled a motel today. And she's like, oh, shit, what if this goes wrong? Don't worry about it. It'll be fine, right? We've got processes, systems, procedures. But over the years, you learn things that you don't like. If you have a problem, you can either get scared, pack up your ball and go home and don't play the game, or you can sit there and just, work out a way of how to own the whole playing field to work on. And, a lot of people want to be successful, but, they don't want to do what it takes, right? Let's just assume a sports person. I don't watch any sports whatsoever. I don't follow any sports or anything like that. But let's assume that a sports person out there, I don't know, that Novak Djokovic or whatever his name is, right? Let's assume this guy, he goes out there and he's the number one player. I don't even know if he is or not, but I just heard the name. If you've got one of these sports people and they're out there, winning their game at the top of their game, you don't see these people at the top of their game, but they go, oh, look, I'm not going to, they don't get there from training. They don't get there from dieting. They don't get there from, physical, mental torture to be able to get there. And it's tough for them, I'd imagine, right? They'd have to have, you can't go to Macca's every night and, all that sort of stuff. So they would have their own life that they have to be in line, regimented, have processes, procedures in order to, do. It'd be easy for one of their friends to say, don't skip this weekend's worth of training and come and party for us down at the local club. And if they did that and they took that choice, well, then that could cost them their next game. So it's very, very important to understand that every action you have will have a reaction. If you have clarity on your vision to be successful, whatever that success looks like for you, whether it's a physical thing, whether it's a materialistic thing, whether it's a spiritual thing, whether it's a monetary thing, whatever that success is for you, understand what that is that you're going to and just take all the steps it is to get there. If things get in the way, you've got to work out, is it something that's very important? Is it something that's not important? Can it wait? Can it park to the side? I quite often say when I have issues in business, right, I've got hundreds of staff, I've got national businesses, I've got dozens of different sort of industries which I have business in. And quite a lot of times people say, how do you handle that? And I always say and reply to the same thing. If someone is dying, if I'm meant to be vacuuming the carpet, right, in the house, if someone is dying in the corner, yes, I need to vacuum the house. But do I vacuum the house and then worry about the person later, or do I go and attend to the person that's dying and save their life and then come back and vacuum the house, right? So in business, in juggling things, in the environment, you need to cut out any bad noise. Like I've had times where I've had bad people around me. I've had people that are very ugly, not ugly as in looks-wise, I've had them too, but ugly inside and ugly mindsets, ugly culture, and you have to work out what is, the challenge to overcome. And I just look at everything, I guess, nowadays that where I'm at in my life, that it's just a game, right? I've already won life. I'm alive. I'm well. I'm healthy. Everyone around me is good and healthy and all that. So I'm already winning on that front. So all that I'm going to be doing is just a game to be able to push to the next level. So when adversity comes now, it's just like, okay, well, I've dealt with a lot worse than that. This is what we need to do. And I just make logical decisions that don't have emotion attached to them. And I think it's very, very important. So make sure you get, your life squared out, whether you've got a good boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or whatever, make sure that your kids are, good and all that sort of stuff. You can control some things in your life. You can't control other things in your life. You got to weigh it up as to what level you'll accept and what your tolerating is. The strength of any of my businesses, what I will accept as the worst hanging fruit from that. So back in the old days, it used to be like, oh, this person's a good person, that person's a good person, whatever. I want the best people. That's what I do, right? So I had to toughen up in a lot of areas of my life, and it's part of growing, part of learning. A lot of people just give up at a certain level, and I just keep pushing forward and having fun along the way. Next question is, what is your real estate strategy for the next 5 years? It's a good question. It changes all the time. I still buy bread and butter foundation properties in my portfolio. So just as all the properties I've talked about over the years with myself and my investors, last year in 2021, this is like the first week in 2022 when I'm recording this. But in 2021, I bought about 8 normal residential properties that I would buy for any of my investors or for myself for my foundation property portfolio. Looking at the other part of my portfolio, I went out and bought 35 motels, pubs, and hotels, as a group that I've built. And yeah, I bought some farming land as well, some cool stuff from that front. The year beforehand, I forget, I just look in the year that I was just in. So, but there's been times where I've gone out and bought lots of large land holdings and lots of different things. I think if we fast forward my portfolio over the next 5 years, I will be keeping all of my assets that I've ever purchased. I don't have any intentions of ever selling them, even if it's just the smallest little unit or whatever that I've got in my portfolio. I still plan on keeping that. I think as for acquisitions go, I will continue to buy standard bread and butter residential real estate. I will continue to buy the motels. So I've got a goal of getting 20 motels per year. I wanted to get 100 motels in 5 years. If I can fast track that even further, great. I think as we fast forward in the next sort of 5 years, I will be going back to a lot of those properties that I've picked up over the years previously and look at doing development on them. So I'm not a developer. I don't pretend to be a developer. I don't even want to be a developer. But I just think I'll get bored at some point and I'll go back and develop a lot of those properties that I bought over the years. So I've got about 200,000 square metres of land in Sydney itself. A lot of that stuff is, opening up to sort of rezoning all that. So I can actually build, 20 on this one, 30 on that one, 50 on this one, 100 on that one. So I'll probably go back and develop some of those things. I'll probably keep them myself and just rent them out, as I don't have an interest to be selling those assets off. And building maybe some unit complexes on some of my sites, not going too deep into what, where, and why. But yeah, I see my strategy has been very similar and consistent over the years, and I don't see anything changing on that front. I've got a very solid strategy from buying well-priced real estate that's below market value. I'm pretty lazy. I don't like going out and developing, building, selling. If you sell an asset, you have to go reacquire it, and it's going to be more expensive to reacquire it, so I'm not into that sort of space. So my portfolio will be much the muchness, but I'll be more capitalising on all the assets that I bought over the last 2 decades. Fourth question is, will Australia become a nation of renters? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that as we go into hyperinflation, we will start seeing people not being able to afford things and they'll be forced into rental. If we look at places like New York, for example, a little unit in a city could be worth like $20 million, $30 million, that sort of stuff. If we look at New York, for example, we see that little units in the city could sell for $20 million, $30 million, that sort of stuff. I think as we see our country grow, I think as we see inflation grow, it will become harder and harder for people to buy properties. In New York, for example, people don't expect or have the mindset that they're going to be purchasing a property. They are looking for the opportunity to be able to rent a property. So I do think that as time goes on, it will be harder and harder for people to buy properties because they won't really get the capital. But I still think the market will be pushed forward. There will still be a lot of opportunities throughout the country. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that we'll all go to renters because someone's got to own the property. Certainly if there's a lot of people like myself and my investors and our community that buy a lot of these properties, we will hold a large percentage of that market. And we'll be able to have those assets that people won't be able to afford. So it's pretty cool. The next question number 5 is, will high inflation burst the housing bubble? So I'm going to tie that back into question number 4. I think that high inflation will just push the cost of everything up. So if we look at it at the moment, going back 2 years ago, tiles, I could buy these specific tiles for like $19 a piece. They went up to $31. The other day I paid $33 for the tiles to renovate in the motel in the Blue Mountains. So the cost of the tile has gone up so greatly. Cost of the labour has gone up dramatically. The cost of copper pipe has gone up. The cost of copper in the electric has gone up. So unless we see everything crash in a deflationary cycle, which I don't see happening because they just keep printing money, we will not see the cost of building a property come down at all. So if we don't see the price of construction coming down, then we will continue to see the need for those products to build the properties. So the prices of new dwellings coming to the market will go up. So there generally becomes a point where it becomes too expensive to build a property to make it profitable, which is where the market sort of taps out. You might see a couple of years as a stagnant in the market, but if we don't have enough properties being built and we've got inflation, if we've got immigration, we're going to see, as borders open up, we're going to see a lot of immigration. We're going to have to import more taxpayers. When I say import, I mean that with a lot of respect. We can't breed taxpayers quick enough, so we need from immigration to come in. We're going to need more taxpayers to come in the country to be able to help with our debts, our high levels of debts as a nation. So we will continue to see lots of immigration come into the country. As we see immigration, there'll be a demand for this housing. As we see, the demand there, but if the properties are costing too much to build, then there's a pent up of demand, and then that'll push the price up dramatically itself. So I don't see in any way that inflation will cause a housing bubble crash. It would be deflation that we would see a housing property market crash. And all of my data that comes in from there would come from the central banks and the level of stimulus packages that are being printed. So as the start of 2022, we're starting to see that there is no stimulus packages out there. And I think that'll be a little bit of a dark sign for all markets. And we're starting to see it with all the paper markets, whether it be cryptocurrencies, whether it be shares, whether it be any commodities, everything's starting to get a little bit shaky because they're not printing money like they were. So they need to go back to printing money. And as long as they print money, that money is going to trickle down and find a home, and that will probably be your own home or your investment property. So inflation is what will cause the market to go up. Deflation will see the market come down. Next question, number 6. What is your best and worst real estate investment deal, and what did you do with it? Good question. My best real estate deal, I got this one. It's nothing sexy, nothing flash. I can't say what I'd normally call it because it's the business that's in there. I think I've got maybe some confidentiality that I can't talk about it because it's an ASX 200 listed company. But I've got this property that was an old Video Easy store, and it was not rented for about 12 years. I bought it for $465,000. It's a waterfront property in the heart of the Central Coast, in one of the major areas in the Central Coast. And this property used to be a Video Easy store, and it went broke. It didn't have a tenant. I bought it for $465,000. I had it vacant for maybe a year, and then I leased it out on a 20-year lease to an ASX 200 company. They pay me annually. It's now about $100,000 a year, and it goes up every year with CPI, and they just pay it a year in advance every single year. And I just like it because it's a fun property. But at the time I bought that, interest rates were probably about 9%, 8%, and if I had have bought it and held a bomb in my hand that was going to cost me, $40,000 a year negative cash flow, it would have been an ugly, property if I held it for another 12 years without having a tenant. It's just that I had the tenant. If I didn't have the tenant in that property now and I was to sell it to a developer, I'd probably sell it for about $2.5 million. You can build 6 levels of units on top of it. It's a pretty cool property. My worst property could have been probably one of two. And it's really just down to management that screwed me. So the first one is a property it's an ongoing legal matter. I'm suing a real estate agent. A real estate agent didn't pay my insurances for my property as contracted to, and they were very rude about it. The house burnt down, right? So now I'm sitting with a block of land and no house and no insurance on the property. That property it was only in a little shitty regional town. I had 5 properties in there. It's a place called Moree in New South Wales, real shithole of a place these properties are in. I mean, no disrespect if anyone lives in Moree, they'll know where I'm talking about when I say it, they'll go, "Oh, he's got over there, does he?" But but they've been trashed and stuff like that. I've sold most of them. I'm just waiting for this one for the legal case. I'm suing the agent and whatnot, and going to get a lot of money from it when I'm finished. And yeah, that would probably be my worst one, just due to the bad, poor property manager that was in the property looking after it. And probably another one that was a bad one is my Blue Mountains motel. So this property I bought as a motel back in like 2013. I never ran it as a motel. I never actually had any interest as running as a motel. I put in there like housing commission tenants in there. It was a motel. I thought it was rented out to normal people full term. They saw me in a newspaper, saw an article, and then they tried to extort me, and they said, drop your rent from $210 to $195 or we're going to go to council. So they went to council, and then I had to kick them all out. Oh, it's a funny story. But I was getting like $400,000 a year, $1.6 million for it purchase. I was getting $400,000 a year, great investment. And then I had to kick them all out. Then I had issues with ice addicts breaking in and people causing riffraff and all that sort of stuff. Gangsters going in there, bullets in the place. I'd have to go in there with a bat to see if anyone's in there sometimes. And yeah, basically this place, like when I say I took the bat in there, I literally would go in there and I'd find people OD'd on the floor with heaters going on, like, what's going on here? I took it for my own sort of safety as I was trying to sell it. I was trying to sell it for many years. And then I had someone in there. I never got any rent from the property for a long period of time. I went to go sell the property, and then I was like, hang on a second, the terms aren't right. I'm going to become a motelier anyway. Why don't we keep the property? So that property there turned out to be one of my worst investments as well, because holding costs on these sort of things, if you own a motel, the costs are like $30,000, $40,000 a year just for council rates. It's not $2,000 a year for council rates, it's $30,000 a year. So imagine 5, 6, 7 years of this, no income coming through, certain bad decisions that were made along the way, reasons why I couldn't remove the people from in there. And then now I'm doing a reno on that in the millions. And that property should hopefully turn around from being, it was a really great property to start off with, turn into a really shit property, but I persevered, and it should bring me in sort of $2 million profit minimum per year after all expenses. So that one will give me a very good earn once it's finished. So, you know, it wasn't that they started off bad. Sometimes, you know, management of things, you can handle things better, is what you do with the property. So I've seen people get themselves into trouble with properties over the years for good, bad, and indifferent. And, you know, I think what comes down to is how you handle that situation. But I'm not a big fan of, you know, selling off properties, but definitely those ones which were really rough. I was up to about 25, 30 properties at one point, and that's when I started buying a few of these sort of house commission areas which have got a very bad reputation and have a lot of violence and arson and stuff like that. Certainly, you know, those sort of things I don't care about in my portfolio. I'm happy to see them go, but it's just more of an admin issue than anything. But they've still gone up very much so. Like stuff that I bought for 20 grand still sells for 200 grand, 300 grand. So I've done very well out of them if you look at them on an investment front, but they're just pain in the ass sort of properties. So next question is, you say never to sell a property, but should you sell in the case of having negative geared property since it's losing you money for several years, or should you hold on and hope it grows in value on several property cycles? That's a good question. There's too many questions around that I've got for you. So if you've got a negative geared property, should you sell it? I own negative geared properties, right? It's not my game to go and buy negative geared properties, but I do own some. And the reason why I own negative geared properties is not because I want to claim a tax credit or anything like that. It's purely that I bought them for a future sort of development potential. So in Sydney, I've got these ones that I've talked about, which are, you know, 20, 30, 40,000 square metre blocks of land that I can build, you know, 100 houses on, 50 houses on in the future. They might be negative 30, 40 grand a year, but I've been able to go back and then add value to them where I can actually lower that down to maybe 5 or 10 grand a year losses from those properties. But they've gone up like $2 million a year for the last 2 years, 3 years, whatever. So looking at them, if you can see if you can try and turn that around. But the reason why, you know, I'm just going to reread your question because it's very crucial, right? I think you've answered a little bit in there. Should you sell in case of having a negative geared property? So if we take that, no. If I'm answering the question of should you sell a negative geared, not necessarily. Simply losing money for several years, or should you hold on potentially, and this is the part that scares me, and hope it grows in values over several property cycles, right? I don't hope, I don't pray over property, right? I don't wait for several market cycles, right? This thing here, if you've got a property that's negative cash flow 10 grand a year, in 10 years time that's 100 grand, that property has to go up $100,000 to recoup all your losses just to break even to where you are today, because you haven't lost all those losses yet, right? So you need to work out how far negative geared you are. What is this property doing? If the property's gone up in value, let's say you buy, I'll just tell you when negative geared's good. If you buy a property for $400,000 and it's worth $700,000 and you're going to make 300 grand on it, it's okay. If it's negative 20 grand a year, 10 grand a year, it shouldn't be negative on 400 grand purchase, but let's assume it's negative 10 grand a year and you buy it for 400 grand and you're making 300 grand in equity, you can go back, pull out equity of say 200 grand, and then with that equity go and buy 4 properties that are positive 5 grand a year each and build out your portfolio. So just because it's negative doesn't mean that you should shoot it and get rid of it. But if you're just buying, hoping over many market cycles, it says here, hope it grows in value. I don't just hope something over several property cycles. You have to wait 10, 15, 20 years. That's gambling. So having a strategy around that is very, very important. I don't mean to sound like a dick about it. But yeah, just clarifying, if it's negative geared, why is it negative geared? What can you do to turn that around? But most importantly, the question you need to be asking yourself is, what is its purpose in your portfolio? How is it going to help you get to retirement? I know very clearly with those properties that are negative cash flow, they were negative cash flow 100% because they're just large land holdings. But what I can do with that is, as I want to develop it in the future, all I need to do is just sell one of those. I've got one property that I bought for $2 million last year, 2.2, and I reckon I can sell it for 10 straight away. That's $8 million in profit. That thing there, it's negative maybe 20 grand a year. Looking at that property, I just made $8 million and I'm not concerned by it. But that's got a strategy. I've had properties that have been negative cash flow by $100 a week, $150 a week, but those things now are positive $150 a week. So what is your strategy behind it? How are you going to turn it positive? How are you going to turn a profit from it? If you're holding a property and it's in some really crap location with not growth potential in front of it, etc., then it might be worthwhile selling it. I can't give you advice on what to sell, what not to sell, but certainly if you do have a property in this sort of circumstance and you'd like to run it past someone for a sounding board or a second opinion or to inspect it, it might be best to contact my office and speak to my team and maybe run through them the scenario and say, hey, here's the property address. Should I keep it? Should I sell it? And then my team will take notes on it, run it past me. I can give some feedback and then give you some advice as to my view on what I see happening with that specific sort of asset. So I can't give you financial advice on whether to sell it or not. But if you do like that, I'd leave the opportunity for you to speak to my team and run that property past me. And I expand that to everybody out there. My 8th question here is, what are your thoughts on a cash safety buffer for each property? Any ideas on how much cash you should set aside in your offset account? I know people that put 50 grand in the offset account, right, which is not really needed if you've got 150, 200 grand property. I know people that have no buffer. For me, I always say to people to put 5 grand aside. 5 grand aside would cover your mortgage for probably 6 months if you had to, before you get into trouble. If you've got 5 properties, then that's 25 grand. If you've got 10 property, that's 50 grand. If you have 10 properties and 10 become vacant, it's going to be very, very uncomfortable for you, but it'd be very, very rare. I've never seen someone have 10 properties and have them vacant. If you've got 10 properties and 2 become vacant, you've got a buffer there. If you've got 10 properties and 5 become vacant, you've got a 10 grand buffer on each one. So I just think 5 grand buffer per property is very safe. For myself, nowadays I have my cash buffers in liquid funds that, whether it be cryptocurrencies, whether it be cash flows that's coming through from other areas of my life. And I keep almost nothing as far as a buffer is concerned, but that's me. And like, if I look at my portfolio and go, okay, 200 properties times 5 grand, that's like $1 million in cash buffer that I need to have sitting there. That $1 million is doing nothing for me apart from losing its value. So I'd rather be using that to buy more assets that are going to bring in more cash flow and expand my position. But it's a matter of having a parameter that works for you and it's in line with your comfort factor and your sleep at night factor and your what's right for you personally. So that's just my thoughts and views on that front. I can see that we're at about time at the moment, so I will continue some more questions on another future episode. Keep your questions coming through. If you need help on anything, you can reach out to my team, speak to my team with the link below. Book yourself in a discovery session, look at where your position is, look at what we can do, look at what options there are for you to help you reach your goals and your cars and live life on your terms. Thanks a lot for tuning in for another week's episode of the No BS with Birchy podcast. And we'll catch up soon. Keep being awesome. Remember to share, like, and check us out next Tuesday on Google, Spotify, Apple Play, YouTube, and bye for now. See ya.
Like Bilal said, man, we're stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it. The dollar about to die, soon to be hyperinflated. This my 2 cents, don't care if you save it. Joint be decentralized and you will see you've been lied to the whole time, and it's the irony, cause they do the exact opposite. You become a slave to the system, enough your money, all they do is profit. There's no conspiracy theory, you better hear me. Crypto will set you free before the system does. I don't care if you do or you don't, but what I'm saying is the truth to the reason you choke. I've never been a failure, excuse my behavior. Keep talking, haters doing me a favor. And you're telling lies, I know what they been telling you. I'm the opposite of Donald Trump of Australia. It's amazing, here for the taking, my time is never wasted.